Hi, welcome to the Trauma Thrivers podcast. Delighted to have you with us. I'm Lula Bentz, your host, a psychotherapist, a trauma expert, and a survivor myself. Lovely to have you with us. The Trauma Thrivers podcast is for anybody who has been through any sort of developmental trauma or who has complex PTSD. This podcast aims to help educate, inspire, and support those of us that are on a trauma healing journey. We've got stories, steps, and various solutions to trauma to help you heal. If you'd like more information or tips or tools or strategies, please go to traumathrivers.com. You can also find this podcast on my YouTube channel, Lula Bentz Trauma Thrivers. If you'd like to join our community of thrivers, please find us on Facebook under Trauma Thrivers. Dufflyn, we are so delighted that you've joined us. For those of you that don't know Dufflyn, I'm sure she's going to introduce herself in a moment, but she is a very good friend of mine and Trauma Thrivers, and she's given up her time to me lots of times before, so I'm very grateful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I just wonder whether you wouldn't mind starting just by telling the group who you are and a bit more about you.
I would be honored, and I'm so excited to be here with you both. As you know, I'm a big fan of Trauma Thrivers, and so I'm a relationship and recovery coach. I help women who are on a healing journey to have healthy, empowering relationships. I'm originally, obviously, I'm American, but I live in Paris, France, and so really, I'm trained in attachment repair. I work with Dan Brown at Harvard on that. I'm trained in Tantra, intervention, and recovery coaching. And so I sort of combine all of these things to create my own special magic potion.
Lovely. Love the magic potion bit. And for those people that don't understand, Dufflyn, could you say a little bit more about attachment maybe to start with?
Absolutely. So if I'm just describing like a basic idea of attachment, essentially every human being has a caregiver when we're a baby. And the way that that person comes to take care of us, it essentially makes an imprint on us, and we create from the way that they come to take care of us an internal working model. And that sort of serves as our love map, if you will. And that's the map that we use not only for our relationships later in life, but also it's about how we see ourselves and how we see the world. So it's a really important part of our self-concept and the way that we operate in relationships.
Okay, so obviously with trauma and also with addiction, it gets slightly skewed, I would say, our attachment map.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is at the root of a lot of mental health issues, in fact, because this is something, right? It happens in the first 10 months of life, right? So it's also nonverbal. So treating it requires that, right, that we use some somatic practices. And this, in terms of trauma, it's more what we call developmental trauma, relational trauma, as opposed to the kind of event kind of trauma, like you went to war and therefore you have trauma. This is more what we, complex PTSD, developmental and relational trauma. So it doesn't it doesn't necessarily require that some big thing happened to you. It can just be about you had a caregiver who maybe was physically present, but not emotionally present with you.
Yeah. And just to give a little bit more color around that, Dufflyn, what are those? I mean, we hear a lot about attachment styles, right? I think that's something that, and I think it's becoming more and more spoken about. Certainly, I see loads of it on social media, on Instagram, things like that. So what are those attachment styles, and where might the different ones come from, or how might we have developed those different styles?
Absolutely. Let's talk about that. So for anyone who, isn't familiar with the different attachment styles, about 50% of the people on the planet are securely attached. So someone who's securely attached generally has the attitude of, I'm okay, you're okay.
Yeah.
That's their attitude, right? And then when we talk about insecure attachment, so the other 50%, within that, there are different sort of attachment styles. So there's someone who is anxiously attached, and that person has high anxiety but low avoidance. And that person's attitude is, I'm not okay, you're okay, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And then we have the avoidantly attached person, and that person has high avoidance and low anxiety. And that person's attitude is, you're okay. I mean, no, I'm okay. You're not okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm okay, but you not so much.
Yeah.
And then we have the disorganized person, and the disorganized person has high anxiety and high avoidance. This person's attitude is, I'm not okay. You're not okay. Nobody is okay.
Yeah.
So, each of them sort of operates a little bit differently, but they're all insecurely attached. And I also want to mention that there is earned secure attachment.
Yeah.
And this is what we get, because if we don't make a concentrated effort to change the attachment style that we establish in those first 10 months of life, it will stay the same throughout the rest of our life. But if we do make a concentrated effort to change that and we work on it, we can create what's called earned secure attachment.
Okay.
So there's hope. Yay!
Yeah, we like a bit of hope. So how do you work on it with your training? What do you do with attachment to help somebody, that 50% of us that are insecure? How do we work through it to get to the earned secure attachment?
So there's an approach, which I've learned from Dan Brown, which is the 3 pillars approach. So we start with the ideal parent figure protocol, because this is really stabilizing that attachment and repairing it, essentially creating a new internal working model.
Okay.
And this is essentially a meditation intervention for attachment repair. So we're working with the client and leading them through what feels a lot like hypnotherapy.
Okay. Yeah.
It's developed from Tibetan Buddhism is the base of this, but Dan was using all of his knowledge about attachment repair, and so he created this. And so what we're doing is we're leading the client through what amounts to a visualization of a set of new and different ideal parents that were perfectly suited to them.
Okay. Lovely.
And as we create that, what happens is that we just sort of naturally start making new choices based on the new perceptual database that we've created, the new internal working model not corrected, because we're not trying to correct or replace the initial experience that someone had. We're just creating a different database for people to make choices from.
Okay. And do you have to repeat that meditation over time rather than just a one-off?
Yes, absolutely. It takes between, it takes a while. I mean, it takes a while to create this, depending on where the person is at, really.
Yeah. So that's one of the pillars. Do you have another 2?
Yeah, and then the other 2 are mentalization and collaboration. So mentalization, it's not that different from MBT, and then collaboration is, working with things like eye contact, right? And talking to the client about taking turns when speaking, things like that. We talked about Grice's maxims, so that's where that comes in, and just noticing things like that, the quality and quantity and relevance of their speech, and then intervening in a kind and loving way, so that they begin to notice it and they can self-correct.
What was coming to me as we were talking about attachment, and I guess I can really, this certainly isn't my area of expertise, which is obviously why we've got you here, Dufflyn. But one thing that I know from personal experience, and something that I've definitely worked through in my trauma healing, is, you know, I believe, you know, now, thank God, through the work that I've done, that I am, you know, 80% of the time securely attached. And I say 80% of the time because I still get triggered, and when I get triggered I can go back into my anxious attachment quite easily, and that is my anxious attachment is my default. And what I have found, as I alluded to earlier, is that I have attracted avoidant attachment. So why is that, and why is it that we attract the opposite of what we are? How does that kind of play out through our trauma?
Well, first of all, opposites attract, right? And within Tantra, there is this thing of polarity that we talk a lot about in Neo Tantra, right? Of the go energy and the flow energy, which is traditionally referred to as masculine and feminine, but I like to say the go and the flow. And many times when we're someone who's anxiously attached, we feel like we're more in our flow energy, right? We're creative, we're chaotic, we're, you know, traditionally feminine in that sense, and very giving and kind of in that energy. And so we may be attracted to people who seem to be more in their go energy. And that said, we live in a hyper masculinized world. And this, what appears to be go energy, what appears to be masculine, but is actually avoidant, right? And I think it's also something that comes from, you know, when we're preoccupied or anxiously attached, that comes from being with a caregiver with whom we're overly involved. We're overly involved in their state of mind, right? So we're used to putting aside our own needs to take care of the other person. And that's where it comes from. So we're familiar with it, right? And when we meet this theoretically masculine, you know, go energy person who's, you know, who's avoidant, it feels like, you know, right? It's like the missing piece, and it feels right to us. Yeah. So we have that immediate chemistry, and it just sort of makes sense to us. Yeah. And we call that the anxious avoidant trap. It's a really common thing, and it's not always male and female. In fact, that's not true. I think there's a sort of misnomer out there that it's more common for women to be anxiously attached and men to be avoidantly attached. But the opposite is also true many, many times, just as often.
Yeah. Okay. And can we swing between different attachment styles with different sexes? So if we had a different attachment with our father than our mother, for example, can we be different with men than we are with women?
Yes, I would say, though, ultimately, I think what Dan would say about that, and he's the guru, really, is that that's a disorganized attachment. Okay. You know, ultimately, and I think that there are people who, you know, they lean more towards one strategy with males and one strategy with females, but also within a particular relationship, even, you know, you may start out being the anxiously attached person, and then sometimes it flips. Yeah. Right. And that usually means that one or both of the people in the relationship are disorganized. Yeah. Yeah. Because as soon as somebody starts to be too warm or too available or too there, you know, it's like, oh, I'm backing off now. And as soon as they back off, the other person starts to feel anxious and goes towards them and then they back off, and we're in that dance again. Exactly.
I like to refer to that as the toxic tango.
That
is good. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that Sue Johnson would love that. That's you know, in her book Hold Me Tight. Yeah, she talks a lot about that.
The toxic tango, or the fuck off, don't leave me.
Yeah, that's another way of doing it. Yeah. as well as those 3 pillars, if we're trying to work with the 50% of us with trauma who probably, well, almost definitely, sorry, I'm trying to be a bit positive, have attachment issues, again, not sure whether that's quite the right word.
Challenges.
Challenges is much better than, thank you, challenges. Sorry, thrivers. I don't mean to use the word issues. I really don't. Challenges. Then how do we start to learn to get that trust and safety, which I am assuming are the underpinnings of what we need to start to form healthy relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's trust and safety is huge and hugely important, right? And we want to, like in the IPF, part of what we're doing is we're focusing on the 5 functions of secure attachment, and safety and protection is primary among them.
Okay.
Right. And so when we want to essentially cultivate that with a client, a lot of times it's just about helping them to take small risks and increase their window of tolerance. So, you know, if the client, for example, is anxiously attached, and I have a friend who just wrote a book called When the F Will He Text?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah,
I love it. And I'm like, yes, for all you anxiously attached people out there, this is a great book. Right. And so the person is sitting there thinking, I can't wait. And they're so uncomfortable with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
If they can wait, 30 minutes longer than they waited last time, it's just tiny bits of growth and beginning to build that trust with themselves, setting boundaries for themselves and saying, okay, I'm going to wait another hour. I can wait 1 hour, and setting that boundary with themselves and then honoring it. Right. So that they begin to trust themselves to take care of themselves. So that's essentially the whole thing with attachment is, what we learned when that person came to take care of us when we were a baby is whether or not we can trust the world to take care of us.
Yeah.
And that also includes, can we trust ourselves to take care of ourselves? And if what we learned was negative, we have to rewire that. But every single time we make a new choice, the brain rewires. You know that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And is that one of the things you said was safety and protection, but there's another 4? Is there another 4?
Yes. And then there's, let's see, safety and protection.
Sorry, I just.
That's all right.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's delight. There's support for exploration. There's, let's see, delight, safety and protection, support for exploration. Why am I blanking on the other one?
Doesn't matter, those 4.
No, I have it written. Soothing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
So we need to have all of those 5 going on really in a relationship to get the secure attachment.
Yeah, what we want in a relationship is to have a felt sense of delight, that the other person delights in us for who we are, not for what we do for them, right? Yeah. A felt sense of safety and protection, that we can rely on that person when we're upset to go to them, and that they can help us, they can soothe us, that we can co-regulate with them.
Yeah.
And that they support us in our exploration out in the world, so we have that safe base to come back to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of what therapy is meant to be, really, isn't it? That's what we're meant to be able to do, us coaches and therapists. And I'm just, thinking about some of my clients today and thinking, how we do that self-soothing piece or that soothing piece, or help them and become the mirror, but also how sometimes those parts don't let us be that attachment figure, or don't allow the soothing, or don't trust enough, because there's different parts of them going on, the defended part or the adapted part, and the vulnerable, not okay child. Sometimes I have clients that won't let me near the vulnerability or the not okay child, because the adapted is go away. I'm disorganized attachment, and I don't want you near me, or even soothing me. If I dare to say a soothing word, it's like the defenses come straight up. Don't be nice to me. So it's how do we help people with that?
I kind of feel, just to say here, like sometimes it's a bit of like a chicken and an egg situation, because we want to feel safe, we want to feel that our partner is safe. So maybe they're trying, they create the safety, but if we aren't feeling safe in ourselves, then so it's kind of like, which can come first? How do we work through that?
Absolutely.
With a therapist. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that the therapist is not in that situation, which is my point. I'm hoping that our therapists are feeling safe and securely attached, because that's our job.
Yeah. So what happens to the other person? Is it that they, where do they find that safety from? Because the safety has to be built. Even if the other person is secure, the safety has to be built. So does it come from the other person, or does it come from them? Like, it's
right. My answer would be it comes from the ideal parent figures.
Yeah.
Because it is incredibly valuable, as you both know, to develop a relationship with a trusted other.
Yeah.
Whether it's your therapist, your coach, your best friend, your sponsor, whatever it is. Yes, and that's huge. And there are some people, as you say, who have difficulty in receiving the soothing, the delight, the support. Yeah. And it's just, we go very, very slowly. But what gives them permission is that they have the agency.
Yeah.
It's all within their power, right? So they start at the core of it, at that right where it all began. With, what I'm saying, with that deepest part of it. And sometimes we have to go really slow with people.
Yeah.
I loved what you said about, I loved the delight bit. And I think, there is a huge part, and again, I can really relate to this personally, which is exactly what you said, Dufflyn, that not being able to receive. For me, there was something a bit icky and about receiving, sort of romantic love, or kind of certainly like in a sexual way at times. But it's, once I got past that, the joy and the pleasure that was in it was just so incredible. So how do we have that? How do we get that?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because that delight is just, it's our birthright, to be delighted in, for our being, for who we are. And it's so important, and it feels so good. And I think many of us, have kind of turned that off, right? In our surviving, when we're in survival mode, right? And as we begin to go back towards thriving, yes, can we give ourselves permission for that, right? And it begins, I think, with being present in our own bodies. So the embodiment work is super important for that, whether you're doing, breath work, or shaking, or ecstatic dance, or EMDR. There's so many different modalities for that. So getting back into your body is super important. And when it comes to the sexuality, I think flirting is so wonderful, right? And can be a way to begin to take a tiny risk. I had one client recently who I gave her the assignment to flirt. And I would say that she's pretty avoidant, right? And so her assignment was to go out and flirt, and she was too scared to do it. So I said, okay, would you be comfortable just observing what flirting looks like in the world? So that's where we start. Sometimes we just have to begin by looking around and saying, what does it look like? And that's just not even a toe in the water. That was like a fingernail in the water. but we, we meet ourselves where we're at, and, and we begin at the beginning. And then for some people who are maybe a little bit further along in terms of repairing their attachment, I love to give the assignment of a self-love tour, which is, self-pleasuring, by which I mean masturbation, just to be perfectly clear. And doing it, setting a time every day, maybe it's for 21 days, because it gives you the chance to really reconnect with your body, with your sexuality, in a way that's completely safe, that you have the control, right? And to sit with whatever comes up, right? If you sit down to do this and you're like, I can't, okay, sit with that. If if you make the time and you sit down to do it and you feel numb, okay, sit with that. If you do it and you feel pain, okay. If you feel pleasure, okay, right? So part of this in terms of how it connects to attachment is that being comfortable and being okay with whatever comes up.
And it's something about small steps to increase the window. So it's just little small steps. Would you say that too?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to go from 0 to 60, but if we go just a little bit at a time, suddenly that window of tolerance is opened up, and lots of times we can see it right before the client sees it. And it's so beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see come up a lot around relationships and certainly around, sexual relationships or sex in relationships or sex by yourself even, is shame. That's a big thing that I see coming up for my clients. So what's the antidote?
The antidote to shame. I feel like, first of all, to be 100% clear, the difference between shame and guilt, right? Guilt is I did a bad thing. Shame is I'm a bad person. And when we're in that shame place, and all addiction, for example, is shame-based. And we know this, right? And so working with shame resilience, I think being in community is a huge part of that, because when we can sit with someone or with a group of people who are like us, and, and I say, who else has felt this? Whatever the thing is, raise your hand, and we see all the other hands. Right? Even just who has felt shame, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here we are. Yeah. And here we are together. It just moves me so much every time it happens. Right. And immediately that mirroring, because I can, if I'm in shame, I can look at Mel and I can look at Lou and I can say, but I'm not ashamed of her, and I'm not ashamed of her. She has nothing to be ashamed of. And I begin to heal myself because I can see that that's me too.
Yeah.
I love that.
Beautiful. There is so much in community, isn't there?
So much.
And so much in groups, and so much in doing things with other people, Beautiful. There was something else about pleasure and joy and delight, and about, how we have that, how we can have more of that, how we can start to embrace that more in our recovery. What are your thoughts on that, Dufflyn? How have you embraced it all in your journey?
One day at a time is how I have embraced it. I mean, I think over the years there have just been different opportunities, and I think if we keep taking those opportunities as they come up and giving ourselves permission. For me, it started, every good coach has a coach. And I have a wonderful coach. Her name is Kim O'Kelly Lee. She's in Bend, Oregon. And Kim taught me when that shame comes up, when, say, for example, I am delighting in myself, or someone is delighting in me, and someone gives me a compliment, and someone says, oh, that shirt looks so great on you, Dufflyn. The old me would have said, oh yeah, but it's an old shirt, and it's nothing, right? And I would have poo-pooed all over their delight.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore because she taught me to say thank you.
Yes.
Right? Just say thank you. It's an amazing practice. You're giving a gift to the other person who's delighting in you, and you're allowing yourself to be delighted in.
Yeah.
So, this is one way I think that it begins. And she also taught me, if I go into a shame spiral and I start to hear that negative self-talk, that, there's another choice I can make. And instead of saying, oh, you're a dummy, blah, 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 you should have, blah, 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 don't should yourself. Instead, say, Dufflyn, you're so cute. Aren't you adorable?
I love that.
I love it. Yeah.
It's my favorite.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
How does shame, I know it's a slightly side question, but I'm just thinking of Imelda, who is a great member of ours who might be watching live or who might be watching later, who was looking forward, I know I saw earlier, to us talking a little bit about codependency. Just before we end, and about, and I think codependency, a lot of it is built around shame, but I wonder whether we could just talk a little bit more before the end about our ways out of shame and codependency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like, the original meaning of codependency was a codependent is a person who's dependent on a person who's dependent on a substance.
Yeah.
Is what originally, right, what it meant. And first of all, can we get away from calling a person a codependent and instead call them a person with codependency?
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't need to be name calling and pathologizing, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like codependency has a lot in common with preoccupied or anxious attachment.
Yeah.
Like it's really, really super similar. So it's going back to that thing where we were over involved in the caregiver's state of mind. We put aside our own needs to take care of that person, and we end up with no confidence and no sense of self.
Yeah.
And so beginning to develop that awareness of me and not me, right, is the beginning. It's just, okay, this is me, this is not me. Do you remember there was a film called, I think, Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere? Yeah.
I've got some train off the top of being.
I know that film.
Yeah.
Great film. Yeah.
Right. So there's a scene in this where, she's been, on her way to the altar several times. She always runs away. Richard Gere is this journalist who's interviewing her about it. She's about to get married again. And he's talking to her and he asks her what kind of eggs she likes. And she's like, well, I like scrambled eggs. But when I was with, so-and-so who I was going to marry, he liked fried eggs. So I liked fried eggs. And before that, I was with so-and-so who I was going to marry, and he liked omelets. So I liked omelets. So she goes to the diner and she sits down and she asks, the waitress to bring her a plate of fried eggs, a plate of scrambled eggs, a plate of poached eggs. She tries them all. And in the end, she says, you know what? The funny thing is, I don't like eggs at all. She has to figure it out for herself, of like, what do I like? Who am I? You know what I'm saying? And sometimes it can be as practical as that, as just figuring out, what's me, what's not me, in lots of different ways, and how that manifests.
And
also, I think, sorry, go on, you go first.
Just one of the things, along that theme, what I find with my clients a lot of the times, they say, well, I don't know what I want, and I don't know what I like, and I don't know who I am. And I say, okay, well, what don't you like? And what don't you want? And who aren't you? Because sometimes actually that's an easier place to start from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an interesting thing to watch someone go through that, right? And over the last, however long it's been now that we've been in this pandemic, 3 years, going on 3 years, there have been a lot of women who have come to me, and I work primarily with women who've been in relationships or marriages, whatever, they're in a thing, or maybe more than one, and they can't figure out if they want to stay or if they want to go. And a lot of them are these people who, You can call it codependency, you can call it preoccupied anxious attachment, but they've just lost sight of who they are.
Yeah.
Right. And getting back into that and finding their way back to themselves, right, is what it's all about. One of the assignments that I like to give those people too is, can you make a list of 5 things that you like about yourself?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's remarkably hard.
Oh my God, I think it's one of the hardest exercises. Yeah. Yeah. So do you find, Dufflyn, that, you know, there have been a lot of women coming to you through the pandemic that are having more moments? Because I think what it's done is it's in some ways, because we've not been able to escape or be as busy or do things, it's made a lot of us have to take that inward journey more and start to question life and where we're at and what we're doing. So do you think more people have been questioning women at the moment about who they are in the world and their place and what they want to do in their relationships, but also maybe who they want to be now? You know, yes. Things are shifting, aren't they?
Absolutely. And in a good way, you know, so this is one of the silver linings, because I think, you know, everything that we're talking about here, it really has a lot to do with, you know, being marginalized as women, and, you know, and let's acknowledge that, you know, let's acknowledge that, yes, we are still marginalized in many ways. And there's gender rage, and there's, you know, and we act out. If we're not acknowledging that, we're going to act out or we're going to act in. Right. And so, and all of a sudden, like being alone with yourself, we've got to face that. And I think a lot of women have suddenly been facing that, you know what, there are some things that are not okay with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you say more about the kind of, gender stuff and what you feel and see is going on, and this kind of, sorry for any men in the group that are watching, you know, hopefully it's not one-sided at all, but this kind of, you know, new feminism almost of or empowerment of women. What are your thoughts on that? Well, both of you really, what do we all see going on? It's an interesting time.
Yeah, it really is. Dufflyn, you can take the floor.
Well, I think for me, you know, first of all, men can be feminists too. So there may be men in the group who are like, yeah, right on. And I love you and you're my people. My dad is a feminist. And I'm very lucky in that way. And, you know, I feel like just the Women's March happened. And a lot, you know, that brought up a lot for a lot of women. And then Black Lives Matter happened. That, you know, that brought up a lot for a lot of women. And then, you know, Me Too happened. And all of these movements, you know, and so all of this stuff is happening at the same time. And it's just, it's out there. Right? Like it's in the social media, it's in the culture. So we're constantly seeing it mirrored back to us, which we need. We need to see it mirrored back to us, because a lot of us, you know, if we're, you know, just at home doing our thing, you know, or at work doing our thing, and we don't get to have that mirrored back to us, we're in isolation. And that's where, you know, dysfunction flourishes. Is in isolation. And so I feel like what I see going on in the world is just more and more women coming together and supporting one another and saying, yes, sister, I see you. You're not crazy.
I definitely see that. And I definitely see the connection and the collaboration, but I also see the empowerment of women, thank God, in that I feel that many more of us are finding our voices. And are able to stand up and actually, you know, there's so much going on, isn't there, where people are actually able to speak out and able to have a voice and able to, say no.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell you what I've seen, this is my sort of bird's eye view on it, is that for so many years, and I think a lot of this is through trauma and is through the conditioning that we get as little girls, which is to, as Lou quite rightly said, to keep quiet, to be the peacekeepers.
Yeah.
And I see the peacekeepers starting to become the peacemakers. I see women saying, no, 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 I'm not keeping the peace anymore. I'm making it. And stepping into their power in that way. And I think I see a real correlation between trauma becoming more spoken about and more people healing from their trauma and women having a voice.
I agree.
And I see a real correlation there that I certainly feel it as a woman. I feel like I'm now allowing myself to step out of the cage, to step out of the box, that my trauma and my conditioning as a girl put me in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, you know, the more and more of us, you know, and anybody listening to this too, any work that you're doing on yourself in terms of your trauma healing, you know, whether it's single incident or PTSD or complex or attachment, you know, or it's societal or cultural or intergenerational, whether it's, you know, sexism or classism or racism or homophobia, or I'm sure I'm going to miss loads out. Sorry, folks, if I do. But we're all standing up and saying, no, no, not anymore. You cannot marginalize people and you cannot re-traumatize people. Yeah. Which is beautiful in a way. So I don't know, I remain very hopeful that, you know, we're on the cusp of something collectively where we can all collaborate, join together and start to stop trauma being continued down through the generations.
Absolutely.
That's my dream.
Absolutely. And I do, you know, I mean, listen, I'm a spoken word poet and a writer before I was anything else, right? So using your voice is 100% where I'm at. And we know that having a coherent narrative of your life, right, it creates healing, creates recovery. So coming from that point of view, you know, yes, 100%, it's about healing our trauma. And it's also about just like person to person in the grocery store, or, you know what, one time, this was a few years back when I was still living in Los Angeles, I walked into the pharmacy. I was at Target and there was this young man behind the counter who he was always there and I just loved him and I would always chit chat with him. And so I walk up to the counter and I'm chit chatting with him like usual. And I was like, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why I did that. I'm so gay. And he's like, oh no, we do not use that word in derogatory fashion. And I was like, you know what? You are right. And I am sorry. And that won't happen again. It was such a brilliant moment for me that like he used his voice and he changed my voice when he did it.
Yeah. That is gorgeous. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Talking of narratives and poetry and books, where is your book at the moment?
It's with my agent in Los Angeles. And you know, she's going to be dropping it to publishers, so we'll see.
Okay, because I can't wait for that. But you have got other things, Dufflyn, that you're working on, haven't you, at the moment?
Absolutely, so many things, and there's lots of free resources on my website. I'm about to release a new, my first mini course online. It's called Love Him or Leave Him. I'm super excited about it.
What's in Love Him or Leave Him?
So it's 3 modules, and it's essentially for women who, you know, like I talked about before, there's just been so many who are in a thing, a relationship, a marriage, something, and they're not sure if it's the right relationship for them. And so how do they figure that out? So the 3 different modules take them through and help them to find the clarity, confidence, and courage they need to make a decision they won't regret. And finding their voice is a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And will you be leading them through the process, or is it live, any of it? Do you get them with you? Do they with you?
No, this one is completely self-paced,
Okay,
online
brilliant.
videos, and there's a huge workbook that's 17 pages long. It's amazing. I'm so proud of it. And I've had some people going through it to test it recently, and they're loving it. But what they can do is they can join my women's group Heartspring if they need accountability and support to go through it, which is also pretty low cost. It's a weekly online women's group on Zoom. So
amazing.
pretty simple. Yeah.
And where are you at? Is it dufflyn.com?
Yeah, they can either go to dufflyn.com. I'm like Rumpelstiltskin. If you can spell my name, you can find me. It's Dufflyn.
That is amazing that you've got that, isn't it? That's just so cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find on social media too. You know, on Instagram, it's at Dufflyn.
Yeah. And I tell you what we can do is we can put all your details and the links and everything under here when we stopped. Yeah, we can put all your links in here.
Great.
Yeah. You're in the group anyway, which is absolutely amazing and lovely.
Yes, I love the group. I'm a fan.
Oh, we're a fan.
If we're leaving people with anything about that, I think it's also that, number one, the earned security is possible, and all of the resources you need are out there, and you know, so if you want that, you can have it. And number two, that, you know, part of the way that we do that and that we heal our attachment wounding is by being in relationship.
We can't do it in isolation, can we?
No.
Yeah.
Can't do it alone. So
yeah,
just gotta open your arms and let us in.
Yeah. Little bit at a time. Yeah. Thanks, guys, and thanks, Dufflyn. And we'll put all the links below, everyone. And I really hope that you enjoyed this as much as we did. And have a lovely rest of the weekend, Thrivers. And hopefully we'll be able to grab Dufflyn back at some point soon.
Yeah, for sure. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope it helped you in some way, and I really hope to see you back here soon. If you have anything to share on today's experience or podcast, please nip over to the YouTube channel or the Facebook group Trauma Thrivers and let us know there.